So last time we had initiated our course on the study of the fifth chapter of a guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life, or Bodhicharyavatara. So Venerable now notebook covered 22 verses from fifth chapter. So for today's session, we're going to continue the discussion. The chapter is on guarding alertness. So we'll try and see what are the benefits, what are the faults of not guarding your alertness and mindfulness. So those are the things that we're going to cover today. But before we get down to our session, let's just settle down and calm our minds, clear the chatter in our minds. So, and then follow it up with doing a short motivation setting. So just make yourself comfortable in your seats, and you can sit in Sukhasana or complete lotus posture. Keep your arms relaxed and your right palm resting in the left palm. Tips of the thumbs touching each other. And keep your back erect, shoulders straight. Keep your chin slightly tucked inwards. And keep your eyes closed. And the tip of the tongue resting against the upper row of teeth. And just gather your thoughts. Just remind yourself that you're here to study a little bit about the spiritual path. Also leave your routine, immediate concerns, and just try and focus on the session for today. We'll try to get rid of this discursive state of the mind by focusing on the in-breath and the out-breath. So start off by observing the sensations of in the area between the tip of your nose and the upper lip. So just bring the focus of your mind to the area between the tip of your nose and the upper lip. So turn the focus of your mind to in-breath. Observe which nostril it's passing through. And observe the sensations that you experience as you breathe in against the walls of the nostril. Also observe how your chest rises and your abdomen rises as you breathe in. Now turn the focus of your mind to your out breath. Observe the sensations in your nostril as you breathe out. And also observe the movement of the chest and abdomen as you breathe out. Now come back to the in breath, count it as 1, the out breath is 2, and so on till 21. Okay, let's just do a motivation setting for the session today. So just recollect that we've been blessed with the human form in this lifetime, uh, endowed with the 10 endowments, and also free from the 4 unfavorable states in the non-human realms and the 4 unfavorable states in the human realm. So just recollect these 8 freedoms and the 10 endowments. So there are 4 freedoms that pertain to the unfavorable conditions, freedom from the unfavorable conditions in the non-human realm, and 4 that pertain to freedom from the unfavorable states that we could experience in the human realm. And then there are the 5 endowments, the personal endowments, and 5 endowments that pertain to others. So recollect that we are indeed very fortunate to have been born in the human realm, in a place where the Buddha has preached the doctrine. The doctrine is still being practiced by his set of followers, the bhikshus and the bhikshunis, the upasaks and the upasakas, that we have adequate intelligence to analyze and understand the doctrine, uh, that we are free from the burden of the 5 inexpiable sins that can bring immediate retribution in the form of rebirth in the hell realms, and that we have faith in the validity of the Tripitaka. So think about all these endowments and be convinced that indeed this rebirth that we've been blessed with is quite fortunate. But it's also susceptible to being terminated by any number of forces that pervade in the environment that we reside in. So bring to your mind the meditation on the 3 reasons and the 9 points on death and impermanence. So we know that death is inevitable. We know that the time of death is uncertain, and that nothing but the Dharma teachings, nothing apart from the Dharma teachings can help us at the time of death. So just recollect that discussion on death and impermanence. So this fortunate rebirth, human rebirth, can easily be terminated because of these forces, uh, because of death. And then, as the Buddha said, uh, since we are discussing the Bodhicharyavatara today, in the fourth chapter in the Bodhicharyavatara, the Buddha says, rather, Shantideva is quoted, the Buddha is saying that Manushyam Ati Durlabham, meaning that human rebirth is extremely rare. And Maha Arnava Yuga Chidra Kurma Arpanopama, meaning that on the Maha Arnav, meaning a great ocean, if you have a small yoke, iron yoke, um, floating on the surface of the ocean, being thrown either and either by the forces of the ocean. This is a simile of the ocean of samsara, where we are thrown about either and either by the forces of karma and affliction. So the probability of a turtle that surfaces only once in 100 years, what is the probability of that turtle poking its neck through the iron ring? It's almost negligibly small. So getting a human rebirth again would be indeed the probability would be very, very small. So just reflect on that fact. So that being the case, now it's incumbent on us to ensure that we make the best use of this opportunity that we have right now, to at the least ensure that even in the future we continue to be blessed with similar kind of favorable conditions. So for that, we need to ensure that we are not reborn in the lower miserable realms. At the least, that should be our spiritual goal. Even better, because even if you're reborn in samsara, in one of the fortunate realms of humans or gods, you're still subject to the forces of karma and affliction, and you'd still be subject to suffering. So, a better spiritual objective would be to aspire for complete liberation from all kinds of samsaric suffering. And it would be unwise on us, on our part, to aspire only for individual liberation and leave behind our near and dear ones in this samsara to suffer. So, a better spiritual objective would be to work for the liberation of all sentient beings. And how does one do that? One works on the path toward attaining complete enlightenment or some bodhi, because only a completely enlightened Buddha can meaningfully assist all sentient beings, and we do not have that capacity at the moment. So mere aspiration will not be sufficient. So aspire for the state of a completely enlightened Buddha for the purpose of helping all sentient beings free themselves from the forces of karma and affliction. So that your mind rests in the state. I'll just recite a couple of verses to just reinforce that motivation. So these are verses from the Guru Puja. The first one talks about the precious human rebirth, realizing how this body of liberties and endowments is found but once, is difficult to obtain and is easily lost, I seek your blessings, my gurus, to partake of its essence, make it worthwhile, and not be distracted by the meaningless affairs of this life. The second verse is about developing the wish for liberation. Violently tossed amidst waves of delusion and karma, plagued by hordes of watery denizens, the three kinds of sufferings, suffering of change, and all pervasive conditioned suffering. I seek your blessings, my gurus, to develop an intense longing to be free from this monstrous ocean of boundless and vicious existence. And let's just reflect on the Bodhicitta prayer. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly by my practice of giving and other perfections. May I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. So this is the Bodhicitta prayer. With that Bodhicitta prayer, we set up your motivation for our session today. I'll just recite a couple of prayers to ensure that there are no obstacles for our spiritual practice. So there are three prayers. Remembering the three jewels of refuge, and then praise of the 21 taras and the Heart Sutra. So if you have in this text, you have those prayers. This one. Yeah. So the first one is remembering the three jewels. I don't think that one's there in this text. Yeah, only the praises to 21 taras and the Heart Sutra. So I'll just anyways quickly recite it. Namah Sarva Buddha Bodhisattvacharyavatara Buddhanusmriti Itipi Buddha Bhagavan Sarvagataranta Samya Sambuddha Vidyacharana Sampanna Subuddha Loka Vidyanutara Purushadam Sarati Shastra Deva Manushya Nam Buddha Bhagavan Iti Nishans Tathagat Punya Nam Avipranasha Kushalamula Nam Alankrit Shanta Alay Punya Nidana Nam Chitrita Vanumanjane Kusmita Lakshaniya Pratirupa Gocharina Apratikula Darshanina Amirati Shabdadi Mukta Nam Anbibur Pradnya Anvamardaniya Baleya Shastra Savasata Nam Pita Bodhisattva Nam Raja Riputgala Nam Sarva Nirvana Nagara Samprastita Nam अप्रमेय ज्ञानेन चित्त प्रतिपानेन विशुद्ध स्वरेण स्वादनीय कोशेन सच्चिन् रूपेण प्रतिस्मिकायेन अलिप्त कामेन अलिप्त रूपेय संसृष्टारूपेय विप्रमुक्त स्कन्देभ्य विसप्रतदातुभ्य संवृतायतनीय प्रचिन्न ग्रन्थेय विमुक्त परिधान्य परिमुक्त सृष्णया ओगादुतीर्ण परिपूर्ण ज्ञानेन प्रतिष्ठितो अतीतानागता प्रतिपन्नानाम बुद्धानाम भगवतां ज्ञानेन प्रतिष्ठितो निर्वाणे स्थितो भूतकोटयां स्थित सर्वसत्त्वलोकनीययां भूमौ सर्वैः तथागतानां विशिष्टा सम्यग्गुणाः धर्मानुस्मृति सधर्मस्तु आदौ कल्याण मध्य कल्याण पर्यवसानि कल्याण स्वर्स्यंजन केवल परिपूर्ण परिशुद्ध परिवदात साख्यात भगवत धर्म सादृष्टिक निर्ज्वर अकालिक औपनायिक कशिक प्रत्यात्म वेद्य विद्य साख्यात भगवत धर्म विनय सूत्र विदित नैरानिक संबोधिका भिन्न संस्तुप सप्रदिशम दोतिका सुप्रतिपन्न भगवत आर्य संगमया प्रतिपन्न विजय प्रतिपन्न सामिच प्रतिपन्न अंजलि कर्णी सामिच कर्णी पुण्य क्षेत्र महादक्षिण परि शोधक प्रावणि आर्य त्रिरत्न सूत्र सूत्रम समाप्तम आर्य दारा नमस्कार विंशति स्तोत्रम ओम नमो गते आर्य श्री विंशति ताराय नमस्तारे तुरे वीरेक्षण द्वितीय निमेषणे त्रैलोक्यनाथ मुक्ताब्ज सिद्ध कमलोद भवे नमः चर चंद्र संपूर्ण वराण्य तारा सहस्त्र किन्ने प्रसत किन्नो जले नमः कंठ नीलाभ पानि पद्म विभूषिते दान वीर्य तप शांति तितिक्षा ध्यान गोचरे नमस्तदागत उष्णीश विजयनंत चारिणी शेष पारमिता प्राप्त जन पुत्र निशीविते नमस्तुतार ओंकार पुरिता शादी गंतरे सप्तलोक क्रमा प्रांते अशेष करुणाक्षणे नमः शक्राणं ब्रह्म मरु विद्वेष अर्चिते भूत वेताल गंधर्व कन्याक्ष प्रस्तुते नमस्त्रदीति फटकार पर्यंत प्रमर्दिनी प्रत्यारीड पद्मासे शिखी ज्वाला कुलोज्वले नमस्तुरे महाघोरे मार्गेर विनाशिनी विकृत ओंकार सर्व शत्रु निशोदिनी नमस्ते रत्न मुद्रांकर हृदयांगुली भूषिते भूषता शेष दिक्चक्र निकरस पराकुले नमो प्रमोदितो दिप मुकुटा शिल्पसारिणी सत्रस्तु तारे मार लोक शंकरी नमः समंत गोपाल कटाकर्षण चिमे चर्वरोगड़ी ओंकार सर्वापद विमोचनी नमः श्री खंड खंडेन्दु सुमुता पद्म विश्वमिता भजटा भार वासुरे के नमः नमः मानभूत भूगज्वाला मानातस्थिते आले मुदिता भद्र गुचक्र विनाशिनी नमः करतला घात चरणाहत भूतले भ्रुकुटी Pratamkar Saptapatala Vedini Nama Shiva Shiva Shanti Shanti Nirvana Gochare Savarna Sanयुक्ते Mahapatak Nashini Nama Pramudita Bhatri Bhugata Pravedini Dashaksha Padnyasi Vidya Omkara Dipite Namaskare Dure Padagata Omkara Bijite Mero Mandar Kailash Mandre Sharini Namasura Surakar Nak Kristite Tara Davri Prakari Ashish Vishnashni Namasura Ganesh Kinar Sevite Abad Mudita Bhokari Nashni Maschandra Sampurna Naditi Baswari Tar Visham Joranashni Namaste Tattva Vinyasa Shiv Shakti Samanvite Grava Vetalo Shishmanashni Pravrit Ure Mantra Mula Meda Stotra Namaskare Vimshati. I'll recite the Heart Sutra. Pradnya Paramita Hriday Sutra. Namasarvadnyaya एवं मैं श्रुतम एकस्मिन् समय भगवान राजगृह विहरति स्म ब्रूदपुटे पर्वते माता विश्व संगेन साधर्म महता च बोधिसत्व संगेन तेन खलु समेन भगवान गंभीराव संबोधन नाम समाधिं समापन्नः तेन च समेन आर्यवृत्तेश्वर बोधिसत्व महासत्व गंभीरायाम प्रज्ञापारमितायाम चर्याम चर्माण एवं व्योलोकिति स्म पंचस्कन्धास्तां च सो शून्य व्योलोकिति अथायुष्मान शारिपुत्र बुद्धानुभावेन आर्यवृत्तेश्वर बोधिसत्वमेतद्वोचते कश्चिन् कुलपुत्र गंभीरायाम प्रज्ञापारमितायां चर्याम चतुकाम कथम शिक्षितव्य एवं मुक्त्यार्यवृत्तेश्वर बोधिसत्व महासत्व आयुष्यमन्तं शारिपुत्रमेतद्वोचत एकश्चिन् शारिपुत्र कुलपुत्र वा कुलद्विता वा स्याम गंभीरायाम प्रज्ञापारमितायां चर्याम चतुकाम तेनैव विलोकितव्यं पञ्चस्कन्धास्तां स्वशून्यान् समुपश्यति स्म रूपं शून्यता शून्यतैव रूपं रूपान् पृथक् शून्यता शून्यतान् पृथक् रूपं यद्रूपं यद्रूपं सा शून्यता या शून्यता तद्रूपम् एवं वेदना संज्ञा संस्कार विज्ञानानि च शून्यता एवं शारिपुत्र सर्वधर्म शून्यता लक्षणान् उत्पन्नानुवृत्तां विम्लानुना सम्पूर्णा तस्मात् तर्हि शारिपुत्र शून्यता न रूपं न वेदना न संज्ञा न संस्कार न विज्ञानं न चक्षु न श्रोत्रं न घ्राणं न जीवा न कायो न मनो न रूपं न शब्दो न गन्धो न रसो न स्पष्टव्यं न धर्मं न चक्षुर्धातुर्यवन्नमनुधातुर्न धर्मधातुर्न मनोविज्ञानधातु न विद्या न श्रेय यावन्न जरामरणं न दुःखसमुदय निरोध मार्ग न ज्ञानं न प्राप्ति तस्मात् तर्हि शारिपुत्र प्राप्तित्वेन बोधिसत्त्वा नाम प्रज्ञापारमिताश्रित्य विहरति चित्तावरणास्तित्वात् तत्रस्थो विपर्यासति क्रान्तनिष्ठ निर्वाण त्रयद्वयस्थितः सर्वबुद्ध प्रज्ञापारमिताश्रित्य अनुत्तराम सम्यक् अभिसम्बुद्धाः तस्माद् ज्ञातव्य प्रज्ञापारमिता महामन्त्र अनुत्तर मंत्र समसम मंत्र सर्वलोक प्रशमन मंत्र सत्यमित्यत्वाद् प्रज्ञापारमिता मुक्त मंत्र तद्धा गते गते पार संगते बोधि स्वाहा एवं शारिपुत्र गंभीरायाम प्रज्ञापारमितायां चर्यायाम शिक्षितव्यं बोधिसत्व संगेन अथ खलु भगवान् तस्मात् समादरिता आर्यवृत्तेश्वरस्य बोधिसत्वस्य साधुकार्मदात साधु कुलपुत्रे मे तद् गंभीरायां प्रज्ञापारमितायां चर्यां चर्तव्यं यथा त्वा निर्दिष्टमनुमोद्यते तथा गतिर्हद्भिः इदं वोचत् भगवान् आनन्दमना आयुष्मान् शारिपुत्र आर्यवृत्तेश्वरश्च बोधिसत्व सा च सर्वावति परिषत् सदे मानुषसुरगन्धर्वश्च लोकभगवतो भाषितम् अभिनन्दन इति प्रज्ञापारमिता हृदयसूत्रं समाप्तम्. So that's the Heart Sutra. So did you recognize any of the parts that we discussed yesterday? Rupam shunyata shunyataiva rupam rupana pratak shunyata shunyatana pratak rupam. So form is emptiness, emptiness is form, and form emptiness is not other than form, and form also is not other than emptiness. So we had reached till this point. In the next sessions, we'll continue from this point further. Okay, so we've set the motivation, and then we also reflected a bit on the Bodhicitta prayer. So the Bodhicitta prayer is essentially an aspiration for complete Buddhahood, and the purpose being that we want to attain the same kind of capacity, ability that a completely enlightened Buddha has to assist all sentient beings and lead them out of the cycle of samsara. So, having set that aspiration, having developed that, generated that aspiration, just the mere aspiration is not sufficient. Just merely saying that I wish that all sentient beings be freed from suffering and its causes. That itself, it's a very virtuous state of mind, but by itself is not sufficient to meaningfully assist other sentient beings. We need to kind of combine that aspiration with actual practice And there's aspiration on one side, and then there's what is called the engaging bodhicitta. So the aspiring bodhicitta needs to be kind of followed up with the engaging bodhicitta. And how does one develop the practice of engaging bodhicitta? It's by engaging in the practice of the six perfections. Uh, and the six perfections, the practice of the six perfections, will enable us to accumulate the two accumulations, the accumulation of merit and the accumulation of wisdom, both of which are required for us to attain the state of a completely enlightened Buddha, so that then we can deliver on our promise or of a prayer to assist all sentient beings. So, how does one engage in the practice of these six perfections? That is the focus of the text that we are studying, a guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life. So, having generated the Bodhicitta mind, the mind of enlightenment, the person who's developed it, the uncontrived version of the Bodhicitta mind, he's called a Bodhisattva. We don't have that kind of mind in the mind streams. We have a very contrived, very artificial kind of aspiration. But nevertheless, we can use this as a guide to conduct our day-to-day spiritual practice. So this book was composed by an author by the name Acharya Shantidev. So he was a very well-respected practitioner, author of several commentaries, including this one. And then there's a text called Shiksha Samuchaya. So that's another book that he authored. And both these books kind of give very precise instructions on how to conduct your practice on the spiritual path towards Samyak Sambodhi. And they're very concise also. They're not very elaborate. Acharya Shantideva came around the 8th, 9th century. And I think he was from the western part of India. I think he was from Saurashtra. Yeah, he was from Saurashtra. And then he, I think it's claimed that he was in Nalanda University and he taught there. And then he authored these books when he was studying when he was practicing in Nalanda. So the text itself draws on commentaries and sutras by people like Arya Maitreya and Asanga on the one side, and then he's also drawn very a lot of the instructions that he's written down in this guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life are drawn from Nagarjuna's text called Ratnavali. So he's drawn for the method instructions, the method related instructions from Abhisamaya Alankara and Sutra Alankara, authored by Maitreya. And then for the wisdom related teachings and other practice of the other perfections, he's drawn from the Ratnavali and other texts authored by Nagarjuna. So in terms of the view, the tenets that he followed the Madhyama tenets, just like Arya Nagarjuna. So he followed in the footsteps of Arya Nagarjuna and Buddha Palita. And there's a chapter on wisdom in this text, the 9th chapter. It presents the Madhyama view of emptiness. So this book has 10 chapters. Sure, maybe a rough introduction, a brief introduction of this text was done in the last session, but there's no harm in repeating it. So it has 10 chapters. The first chapter is on the benefits of developing the mind of enlightenment, or bodhicitta, or it's called bodhicitta anushamsa. So the first chapter talks about the benefits of developing that kind of a mind. The second chapter talks about papadeshna, or it kind of highlights the virtue of making confessions of the transgressions you've not engaged in ethical practice all in the past, it's better you kind of make confessions about those kind of ethical transgressions, and as, with those kind of confessions, you can purify some of those transgressions, and then that provides us a good foundation to conduct our practice. Then the third chapter is the full acceptance of the awakening mind. So here he's actually presenting the benefits of the engaging bodhicitta. So the first one probably mostly talks about the aspiring bodhicitta. Here it's about engaging bodhicitta, and there he presents the virtues of combining the practice of bodhicitta with the practice of the other six perfections. So the six perfections are the perfection of generosity, the perfection of morality, ethical discipline, the perfection of patience, perseverance, meditative stabilization, and wisdom. So that's the focus of this chapter. Then there's the fourth chapter onwards deals with the how to conduct your training of these perfections. So you'll find that there's no separate chapter on generosity. So the instructions on how to conduct your practice of generosity, they're kind of mentioned in the other chapters, and extensively in the 10th chapter, in 10th chapter on dedication. So the virtues of uh, engaging in the practice of giving your material resources, giving your body, donating your body, giving away your virtues from the merits that you accumulated, sharing your merits. All those kind of instructions are given, elaborated on in the 10th chapter on dedication. So the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth and ninth are pertaining to the practice of the perfections, the paramitas. So the fourth chapter and the fifth chapter actually pertain to the practice of ethical discipline. So instead of elaborating on the practice of the ethical discipline itself, he talks about how to uh, develop the practice of being vigilant, being alert, being mindful, uh, being conscientious, in order to ensure that your ethical discipline is not compromised. So he elaborates on these three, four states of mind to ensure that the practice of ethical discipline prospers. And then the sixth chapter is about patience. Uh, Seventh chapter is perseverance or enthusiasm. Eighth chapter is on meditation, the meditative stabilization of dhyan. Ninth chapter is wisdom or prajna, and parinamana is the 10th chapter, the chapter on dedication. So we are discussing the fifth chapter, the chapter on guarding alertness. As I said, the fourth and the fifth chapter essentially are talking about in practice that we need to engage in to ensure that our practice of ethical discipline prospers. Yeah? So the aim is to ensure the flourishing of your practice of Shila. How that is done is by ensuring that you're diligent, you're mindful, and you're vigilant. So the practice of apramad, uh, being mindful is uh, having smriti, and then the practice of being alert or samprajanya. So these are the three practices that are elaborated in these two chapters, the fourth and the fifth chapter. So we are focusing on the fifth chapter. So how to guard your alertness or samprajanya. So fifth chapter is on page number 34. Okay. So before we look at the specifics of the practice of mindfulness and alertness, as I said, these are being deployed these practices are being cultivated to enhance your practice of ethical discipline. And ethical discipline is one of the six paramitas that we need to practice in order to attain the final goal of enlightenment, complete enlightenment. So it would be nice if we can just go through the need, just uh, review the reasons for which it is essential for us to practice these six paramitas, and why uh, we have six paramitas. Why are the six paramitas necessary, and are these six paramitas sufficient to ensure that we achieve our goal of attaining the state of complete enlightenment? So, why is it necessary to train in these six perfections? So, as I said, we've reflected on the bodhicitta mind, the mind of enlightenment. We have some form of contrived, artificial version of the bodhicitta mind in our mind streams, uh, and that is kind of rooted in our practice of great compassion. So, we have some aspect of great compassion also, uh, but it's what does the great compassion do? It it uh, uh, it wishes that let all sentient beings be relieved of the suffering and the causes of suffering. But merely that wish is not sufficient. Said that is not enough. We must engage in the methods that builds on this great compassion, transforms it into uncontrived bodhicitta, and then combines it with the other six perfections to proceed progress towards the state of complete enlightenment. And the other reason to engage in the practice of the six perfections is that you need both wisdom as well as the practice of method. So prajna and upaya, both these things need to be cultivated to become a completely enlightened Buddha. So if you someone might say that you don't need to practice the uh, generosity, you don't need to practice perseverance. Mere practice of wisdom, that would be sufficient. So why is that not true? We'll come to that in a moment. But the fact is that we need both these things, wisdom and method, to accomplish our goal of becoming completely enlightened Buddha. So it's said in the text called Great Enlightenment Discourse that the sublime wisdom of omniscience it comes from compassion as its root. It comes from the spirit of enlightenment of bodhicitta as its cause, and it is brought to completion or fruition through the practice of method. So all these things are essential in order for us to cultivate omniscience. The root is compassion, the cause is bodhicitta, and the way it is actualized or completed, brought to completion, is the practice of the six perfections by method. So the goal that we are aspiring for is the state of a completely enlightened Buddha, and that goal is, or that state is also said to be the state of non-abiding nirvana. So how does one attain the state of non-abiding nirvana? The state of non-abiding nirvana, what does it mean? What it means is that you do not abide in either of the two extremes. The first extreme is the extreme of samsara, and the other extreme is the extreme of peace in nirvana, the nirvana of the lesser vehicle arhants, who have actualized that nirvana, and then abide in the state of the absorption of cessation. So even that needs to be given up. So both these extremes need to be given up, and the Buddha abides in that state, which is called the state of non-abiding nirvana. And how does it come about? The first extreme, the extreme of samsara, is abandoned by cultivating the practice of wisdom. So you meditate on the wisdom of emptiness, the emptiness nature of all phenomena. You see reality for what it is, and then you're able to abandon avidya, which is the root that binds you to samsara. And by abandoning avidya, then you are free of samsara. So that is the first aspect. So you accumulate wisdom. So that is the first accumulation. You need the accumulation of wisdom. But the other extreme is that you could attain that state of release from samsara and then abide in this absorption of cessation. That is the state of peace or the state of nirvana that the lesser vehicle arhants abide in. Now that also needs to be abandoned, and that happens by the practice of method, the accumulation of punya, or accumulation of merit. And for that, you need to be in possession of the wisdom of the diversity of all phenomena. So this is the method part, and the first one was the wisdom part. So both these things need to be actualized, in order to actualize the state of non-abiding nirvana. And how do they come about? It comes through the cause of bodhicitta and the root of compassion, and the method practice, which is the practice of the six perfections. So all these aspects need to be ensured to be cultivated before we can aspire for the state of complete enlightenment. Now, as I said, some people might believe wrongly that these practices of charity or generosity or morality, perseverance, patience is not necessary for a person to become completely enlightened. Just the practice of meditating in certain kind of samadhis, which are free of any kind of thought. So, merely by meditating on these kind of states, on these kind of samadhis, you can attain the state of a completely enlightened Buddha. And that's an erroneous view. In order for you to become a completely enlightened Buddha, you need to attain the state of non-abiding nirvana, and that comes only through the practice of wisdom as well as method. Both things are required. And just merely meditating on a mind that reflects on, it's empty of any kind of thought, both virtues as well as non-virtues, is not sufficient. That's one of the wrong views that some of the practitioners have. And then there's also the erroneous view that maybe the person believes that maybe the practice of the six perfections, generosity, etc., is not unnecessary. But if you're meditating on the samadhi of emptiness, let's say, then the fact that or this meditation where you do not have any kind of thoughts, you suppress all kinds of thoughts, and because there is no thought, you do not have your thought, your mind is then free of the three kinds of uh, uh, mindsets. When you talk about generosity, for example, there are three aspects to it. There's the giver, there's the gift that is given, and then the action of giving. So all these three things, in order for them to become a proper cause to accumulate extensive merit, you need to reflect on the emptiness nature of all these three aspects. Now, if your mind is free from any kind of thoughts, just the fact that it's free from any kind of thoughts, now it is free of these three spheres. So the person wrongly believes that the practice of generosity is accomplished by the person meditating in this samadhi where the mind is free of any kind of thoughts. And similarly for the other perfections also, the three spheres are being negated. So is that a valid kind of meditation? Even that is not a valid meditation. Why we'll come to that later. So if that is the case, the non-Buddhist practitioners, they do not engage in the practice of the six paramitas. So even they can attain these state of samadhis, where the mind is free of any kind of thoughts. They would be able to attain the state of non-abiding nirvana. Or even the Shravakas and the Pratik Buddhas who have attained the state of Arhants, who have this direct, uncontrived, unmediated vision or realization of emptiness, they do not practice the six paramitas extensively like the bodhisattvas do. Even they would be able to attain the state of non-abiding nirvana. So, even that kind of belief is an erroneous belief. And then there's a set of practitioners who believe that practicing the paramitas of generosity, ethical discipline, etc., is necessary when you do not have any firm knowledge of emptiness. When you have a firm knowledge of emptiness, then these practices are not necessary. Now, if that were the case, then bodhisattvas who have a direct realization of emptiness, uh, specifically the bodhisattvas in the pure, on the pure ground, the 8th, ninth, and the 10th ground, they would also not need to practice any of the perfections, because they have uh, a very, very refined understanding of emptiness. Right from ground 1 to ground 10, they've been practicing emptiness and removing all the obscurations in the mind stream, the gross obscurations first, and then the subtle obscurations later. So they would not be urged by the Buddhas to practice the 6 perfections, because mere realization of emptiness is sufficient for you to cultivate the state of completely enlightened Buddha, the non-abiding nirvana of a Buddha. So these are some of the wrong perceptions that people have, and uh, the this discussion comes in the Lamrim text, and the through this discussion, the author is trying to tell you that the practice of 6 perfections is essential for you to advance on the path towards enlightenment. Now, why 6 paramitas? Then why 6 paramitas, and are they sufficient? So there are various ways to analyze this point. The 6 perfections, they subsume the bodhisattva path. So they are a condensation of all the key points of the training that is essential for you to advance on the bodhisattva path. So they are both necessary as well as sufficient. They include all the kind of practices that the person needs to engage in to advance on the bodhisattva path. Now, how these 6 perfections, they ensure that you have, or at the least, you have well endowed future lifetimes. Because for you to become a completely enlightened Buddha, you need several lifetimes to progress on that path. And in each lifetime, just like this lifetime, you have been endowed with fortunate conditions, favorable conditions. You would want yourself to be endowed with similar conditions in the future also. So to ensure that you have these well endowed future lifetimes in the fortunate realms, you need to practice the 6 paramitas. In order to ensure the welfare of both self and others, you need to practice the 6 paramitas. In order to ensure the welfare of others in all aspects, you need to practice the 6 paramitas. In order to ensure that you realize all the paths and the grounds you need to advance through on the path towards complete enlightenment, you need to practice the 6 paramitas. So, in order to advance your practice of the 3 higher trainings, the practice of ethical discipline, meditative stabilization, and wisdom, you need the 6 paramitas. How? The first point, as I said, to ensure that you have the 4 endowments, to have well endowed future lifetimes. How do you do that? Why do you need the practice of generosity and ethical discipline, etc., for that? So the 4 endowments that you need to ensure that you have an unhindered progression towards the state of complete enlightenment are that you need material resources, you need a able body with which you can act, you need spiritual friends or companions who can guide you, who can assist you in the accomplishment of your spiritual goals. And in order to successfully accomplish your targets, your work, you need to be able to persevere and follow up. So these are the 4 endowments that you need. And these 4 endowments, for example, the first one, the material resources that you need, uh, that would come through the practice of what? Generosity. Yeah. And then the second one is having an able body through which you can act. You need a capable body, you need a healthy body, you need healthy intelligence. How would that come about? It is through the practice of ethical discipline. It comes through the practice of ethical discipline. And then for you to have the right company, uh, to companions with whom you can act together to accomplish your spiritual goals, you would need the practice of patience. Yeah, through patience, you ensure that you make friends, you tolerate any kind of harm that is directed at you through the friends. And through that practice, through the practice of patience, you can create more friends. The fourth one is that you successfully accomplish the targets that you've set for yourself. So what would be the paramita that you need to practice for that? Is the practice of perseverance. You need to persevere. And these four endowments, these practices which accomplish these four endowments, they need to be protected. So you need protection from falling under the influence of any kind of afflictions that would dilute your ability to accomplish these four endowments. So where does that protection come through? It comes through your practice of meditative stabilization. Meditative stabilization, in particular, the practice of mindfulness, the practice of alertness, the practice of diligence, the practice of vigilance, the practice of samadhi. Those are the factors that would help you advance your practice of meditative stabilization, and that will give you the necessary protection to ensure that these four endowments are not compromised. And then you also need the discriminating ability to be able to discriminate through wisdom what is right or wrong, which is a pure practice, which is a not, which is an impure practice, what needs to be taken up as a practice, what needs to be eliminated or abandoned, and that comes through the practice of wisdom. So to ensure a well-endowed future lifetimes, you need the practice of all these six perfections. So the second one was how to ensure the welfare of both self and others. So now to fulfill the aims of others, you need to assist them with material resources, material goods. You need to ensure that the acquisition of the material goods happens only through non-hostile means. You're not creating any harm. You're not a source of harm for anybody else. So in the pursuit of these material goods, you do not harm anybody. So you desist from any kind of hostility to others. And then, in order to accomplish the first 2 points, you need to be patient and disregard any kind of harm that comes from others in the pursuit of these resources and in the pursuit of handing over these resources to others, sharing these resources to others with others. So you need to disregard any kind of obstacles that come through the other sentient beings. So this fulfills the aims of others. So to help others with the material goods, again, what do you need? You need generosity. From the through the practice of your generosity in the future, you'll be blessed with material resources in the future. And then, in order to acquire these material resources through non-hostile means, you need to practice ethical discipline. And in order to ensure that you disregard any kind of harm that comes to you through these other beings in your acquisition of, in the process of acquiring material goods, you need to practice patience. So, generosity, ethical discipline, and patience, these are all required to fulfill the aims of others. And then, how to ensure the aims of our own selves. So, in order to attain our own aims, our aim, the most important supreme aim that we have is to attain the bliss of liberation. How does that come about? It is through the wisdom of emptiness. So you, through the practice of perfection of wisdom, you attain that, uh, attain the bliss of liberation. In order to attain the bliss of liberation, you need to ensure that your mind is free of any kind of mental distraction. So you need to attain some sort of serviceability of the mind. You need to attain the state of shamatha. Uh, that's what makes your mind serviceable and pliable and compliant. That happens through the practice of what? Meditative stabilization. And in order for both these things to prosper, for you to attain the bliss of liberation through wisdom and to attain a state of complete freedom from mental distraction through meditative discipline, stabilization, you need to persevere. So you need to abandon any kind of laziness that prevent you from working, persisting day and night to attain these two states of complete wisdom and a state of complete freedom from mental distraction. So that comes through the practice of perseverance. So you see that in order for us to uh, accomplish our own goals as well as the goals of others, you need to practice the six perfections. So just to summarize, you need these six perfections to completely realize all the paths and the method uh, towards uh, attaining the state of complete enlightenment. So through generosity, what do you do? Through generosity, you enhance your practice of non-attachment to your resources. You're able to share whatever resources you have. And because you do not have any attachment to your resources, to your possessions, you avoid being dominated by distractions of sensual objects. You've given up attachment to your own possessions. So you become free from attachment to your own things and become habituated to giving them away. So that is the practice of that is what the practice of generosity accomplishes. And then you restrain from any kind of distraction of trying to own or possess things through harmful means, through illegal means, or immoral means. For example, when you are living with vows, you have the vow of not stealing. So when you ensure that that vow is not transgressed, you are engaging in the practice of ethical discipline, and with that practice, you ensure that there is no mental distraction, that you restrain from any kind of distraction to acquire things through non-violent means. So that is what you accomplish through the practice of ethical discipline. And through the practice of patience, what do you accomplish? You have accomplished non-abandonment of living beings, because you do not despair at the harm that comes to you through other sentient beings. And through the practice of perseverance, you ensure that you strive day and night to increase virtues. Uh, you joyously persevere at enhancing your practices, ensuring that you accumulate both the accumulation of merit as well as the accumulation of wisdom. So that comes through the practice of perseverance. And then meditative stabilization, what does it do? It helps you deal with the afflictions that are currently residing in our mind streams. So through the practice of shamatha and samadhis, which is what meditative stabilization accomplishes, you can suppress the afflictions. You can't get rid of them along with their imprints and latencies and the seeds, but you can suppress them. So even non-Buddhist practitioners who attain these higher samadhi states, they can suppress some of these afflictions. But in order for you to get rid of these afflictions completely from the root, along with the seeds and the latencies and the imprints, you need to practice the perfection of wisdom. So wisdom accomplishes this interest of ours, that it clears away all the obscurations along with the seeds and the latent imprints and the dispositions. So this is how the six perfections can help us advance our practice on the spiritual path. Now, in order for this practice of the six perfections to prosper, you need to, uh, you know, all these things, they're rooted in our mind. So you need to protect our mind, protect the mind, be diligent that it is not falling, uh, it's not inclined towards non-virtues. And the mind itself, how does it how can it be protected? It can be protected through the practice of mindfulness and the practice of uh, alertness. So that's what we're going to focus on today. How does the practice of alertness help us in this practice of protecting the mind, and how protection of this mind helps us in advancing our practice of the six perfections. So just go to page number. Yeah.
Is alertness like awareness of the mind the same as meditative concentration?
Sorry.
Is it the same as meditative concentration?
Alertness. So there are three or four mental factors which are quite similar to each other. There's the mental factor of attention. It directs the mind towards a specific kind of object. There's the mental factor of mindfulness, which reminds you of the object that the mind needs to focus on. So it has this ability of maintaining the mind on that object, and it has the function of non-distraction. And then there's the mental factor of alertness or vigilance, which realizes in combination with mindfulness if the mind has strayed from that object of focus. Yeah. So there are these three mental factors that we need to work on. Concentration or the ability to remain in a state of one-pointedness uh, on the object that you've chosen. That is a result of all these three factors. Yeah, that would be closer to samadhi. Okay, so the fifth chapter, guarding alertness. We've already seen the first 22 verses, but I'll just briefly revise that discussion. So, what does it? The focus of the first 20 odd verses is to show that the mind being the seat of all our experiences, it is it's essential that we protect our mind. You protect our mind from wandering in the direction of non-virtues. Yeah. And then the later verses then discuss how can we actually effect this protection of the mind. So the first verse in this text, for example, it tells you the necessity of protecting one's mind. So those who wish to guard the practice should very attentively guard their minds. For those who do not guard their minds will be unable to guard the practice. So anybody who wishes to protect the trainings being the trainings of the six paramitas, the training of generosity, etc., and the other perfections. If you want to ensure that your training in these perfections is not degenerating, then you need to strongly focus on guarding your mind. And through guarding your mind, you can guard your practice of the trainings in the six perfections. So you protect the mind, you ensure that it does not wander off in the direction of mistaken objects. So if one does not protect the mind from wandering off, then it becomes impossible for us to protect our practice of the trainings of the six perfections. The second verse talks about the fault of degenerating the mind. So mind that is not focused. So it says, in this world, unsubdued and crazed elephants are incapable of causing such harms as the miseries of the deepest hell, which can be caused by the unleashed elephant of my mind. So the mind is being compared to what here? It's being compared to a crazy elephant that can wander off to mistaken objects and create a lot of harm. Create a lot of harm that can that is incomparable, even when you compare it with the suffering that you experience in the narakas, in the hell realms. It's very intense. So it can create that kind of harm if your mind is not protected. If it's the crazy elephant mind, if it is not bound, then it can lead to immense suffering, and that is comparable to the suffering in the worst of hells. So the normal unsubdued crazy elephant is not capable of creating any such suffering. So the mind here is being compared to a crazy elephant. Um, I think what is being indicated here is that our minds have massive inertia due to the force of the imprints and the predispositions and the latencies that it carries from the past. So we are kind of disposed mostly towards engaging in non-virtuous actions. So if this is not controlled, if this kind of the crazy wandering elephant mind is not subdued, then it can lead to all kinds of suffering that can be compared to the suffering that one experiences in the hell realms. So that is the second verse. And then the third verse talks about the benefits of protecting the mind. So if one, however, if the elephant of my mind is firmly bound on all sides by the rope of mindfulness, all fears will cease to exist and all virtues will come into my hand. So if you tie the crazy elephant mind to a virtuous object and ensure that it stays tethered to that virtuous object by ensuring that uh, your actions of body, speech, and mind they do not wander off in the direction of non-virtue, then you eliminate all the dangers of this life, and you also ensure that your practice of virtues then blossoms, it flourishes, because you're guarding the three doors of your action. So therefore, one should ensure that one's mindfulness of the virtuous object does not degenerate. So this is the third verse. It talks about the benefit of protecting the mind. In brief, it talks about the benefits of protecting the mind in brief. Then the fifth uh, verses, they talk about the benefits of protecting the mind. They kind of build on this verse, the third verse. So there's an extensive presentation of the benefits of protecting the mind in the fourth and the fifth verses. And then the sixth verse, it talks about the reason for us to, work on protecting the mind. So the sixth verse says that the perfect teacher himself has shown that in this way, all fears as well as all boundless miseries originate from the mind. So this is a very important point that is being made, that all our experiences, they're kind of they originate from the mind. All the fears that we experience, all the miseries that we experience, they come from our mind. Yeah, and then in support of this verse, the seventh, uh, the sixth verse, it gives you this. There's a quotation there. There's a quotation that says that all phenomena depend on the mind. The Buddha said in several sutras, there's a sutra called the Dash Bhumi Sutra. The Buddha said that all kind of experiences, they originate from the mind. So through these quotes, and then through specific reasons which are mentioned in the seventh and the eighth verse, the author emphasizes the need on working on protecting the mind. Uh, then to further kind of elaborate, emphasize this point, the author says that all qualities, the qualities of generosity, morality, patience, enthusiasm, uh, mental stabilization, and wisdom, all these kind of depend on the mind. So verses number 9, 10, then 11, 12, uh, 13, 14, 15, and then 16 and 17. These talk about how the mind is central to building your practices of the six perfections. For example, the 12th verse, it says, unruly beings are unlimited as space. They cannot possibly all be overcome. However, if I overcome thoughts of anger alone, this will be equivalent to vanquishing all foes. And then the 13th verse is in support of this verse. Where would I possibly find enough leather with which to cover the surface of the earth? Yet, wearing leather just on the soles of my shoes is equivalent to covering the earth with it. So this pertains to the practice of patience, the practice of generating a state of mind where you do not want to harm, not only not harm others, beings, but also disregard any kind of harm that comes to you through other sentient beings. Now, if there's some harm coming to you through other sentient beings and you do not practice patience, uh, then would that be optimal kind of response? The verse says that, uh, if you generate any kind of anger, then you destroy your patience, your practice of patience. Uh, it's like destroying all all virtues in any kind of any moment where you develop anger towards other sentient beings. It has the potential of destroying a lot of virtue that you accumulated. Uh, this point will come later on also in our discussion. So patience is completely destroyed by one's anger, and it's not possible for us to get rid of all the sentient beings in this world. To ensure that there's no sentient being that you can that would become the object of your harm. Yeah, that is not possible. The only way you can, a better way would be to control, regulate your own mind so that it does not generate any wish to respond to any harm that comes to you through the other sentient beings. So you can't empty the universe of all the sentient beings so that your practice of patience prospers. The better way would be to ensure that your mind itself is kind of regulated against any kind of harm that comes through other sentient beings. And then it talks about the example that it's impractical for us to cover the entire universe with leather to ensure that you're not harmed. Your soles, the feet of your, the soles of your feet are not pricked by thorns that pervade this universe. A better way would be just covering the soles of your feet with leather so that this harm can be negated. So that's a better way. So protect your mind instead of aspiring that or wishing that the universe be emptied of all sentient beings, so that there's no harm that comes to you, and then you do not generate the response of wanting to harm them. So this is the practice of patience, and how the mind is central to your practice of patience. So till verse number 17, it's about the sixth perfection and how your how the mind is central to enhance your practices of the six perfections. And then the 18th verse talks about the need to strive uh, to guard the mind. So how does one guard the mind? It is through the practices of mindfulness and the practice of vigilance or alertness, as it is described in this text. So the way to guard the mind is explained in verse number 19, and the reason why it is necessary to guard the mind is explained in verse number 20, and the benefits of guarding the mind are explained in verse number 21. So verse number 22 talks about generating mindfulness to guard the mind wholeheartedly. What is the verse? Verse number 22 says, "It is better to be without wealth, honor, body, and livelihood, and it is better to let other virtues deteriorate rather than ever to let the virtues of the mind decline." So this verse talks about how the harm that would come to you by being deprived of all kinds of material resources, uh, not receiving any kind of praise, uh, your livelihood being compromised, or your body being not supported adequately. Dealing with these kind of compromises is easy, but if you have to deal with a mind that is not protected, that can be very, very damaging to your practice of the six perfections. So this is the verse number 22. So we'll explore, we'll discuss the verses from 23 till maybe 40 for our session today. So before we do that, maybe take a short break. Yeah. You want to pause this?
We have something called always. Should we also read and with this?
Okay, so we've seen how the mind is central to our practice of the six trainings, and how we should try our best to guard the mind. And now we come to the section which talks about the approach that we need to deploy to guard the mind. The mind is guarded through our practice of generating mindfulness and generating alertness or introspection or vigilance. It's kind of described differently in different texts. So, do you develop the practice of guarding mindfulness and introspection or to guard your mind? So, these are the methods for guarding your mind. Uh, and introspection itself, in turn, can be guarded by cultivating mindfulness. So the text, the following verses from 23 onwards, they talk about first the 23rd verse talks about the need to develop the practice of mindfulness and introspection to guard the mind, and then it goes on. The subsequent 6 verses they talk about the faults of not cultivating alertness. So and then it talks about how mindfulness can be cultivated to ensure that the practice of alertness is not compromised. And then how mindfulness can be cultivated. And then are there any instances where you're permitted to, ease your mindfulness a little bit? In what kind of circumstances that can be done? So that's the focus of our discussion. So the 23rd verse, it says, "O you who wish to guard your minds, I beseech you with folded hands. Always exert yourself to guard mindfulness and alertness." So in Sanskrit it says, "Chittam rakshitu kamanam mayesha kriyate anjali smritim cha samprajanyam cha sarva yatnena rakshata." So anybody who aspires, who wishes to guard your mind in order to guard the training of the six perfections, needs to ensure that the practice of guarding your mindfulness and guarding alertness, that is attended to. So if you don't guard your mind, and you're separated from mindfulness and alertness, then your focus on the virtuous object that you've chosen, that is compromised. And then whatever practice you do, whether it's a practice of patience, whether it's a practice of perseverance, generosity, ethical discipline, etc., and that gets compromised. So the author here is appealing to us, to the practitioners, with folded hands, that do not compromise your practice of guarding mindfulness and guarding alertness. So that is the verse number 23. Just a point before I proceed. This text was a teaching that Shantideva gave to an assembly of monks. So you'll find that the some of the verses, they're actually talking about how a monk should be conducting his practice of mindfulness, conducting his practice of ethical discipline. But the instructions can be extrapolated to others also. But the context one needs to be aware of, because there are certain verses where you might find that it's too specific to a certain kind of practitioner, but it can be extrapolated to other practitioners. The assembly that he addressed was an assembly of monks. So the 23rd verse is talking about how guarding mindfulness and introspection is necessary to guard your mind. And then the text talks about the faults of not guarding alertness. So samprajanya. So if you compromise samprajanya, if you let your vigilance, your introspection, your alertness be compromised, then it leads to your focus on the virtuous object that is at the center of your practice of one of the 6 trainings, that gets diluted. So what are the faults of compromising your alertness? So there are 5 faults that are mentioned here. So any action that is devoid of alertness will lack potency, it will lack power. So that is verse number 24. Any action that you engage in which is devoid of any kind of alertness, that will lack the potency. And one is not able to then generate pure wisdom. That is verse number 25. Verse number 26 is one is not able to generate pure morality. Verse number 27, any earlier accumulation of merit that you have, that gets destroyed if your alertness is compromised. And it obstructs, the 5th fault is that it obstructs the achievement of any fresh virtue that you've not accumulated in the past. So that is explained in verse number 28. So the first fault of not guarding your alertness, verse number 24. People who are disturbed by sickness have no strength to do anything useful. Likewise, to those whose minds are disturbed by confusion, have no strength to do anything wholesome. This we know from our experience, that if your physic is compromised through some sort of illness, no matter how strong you are, even the fittest of athletes, if he's ill, is unable to kind of deploy the physical person towards any kind of activity. So any activity that he engages in is, it lacks any kind of power, lacks any kind of potency. So similarly, if our mind is not guarded by this practice of vigilance or alertness, then any kind of virtuous action that we engage in, that virtuous action will not be potent. It will not have the same potency or any kind of power. So a person who is racked by a strong illness does not have the ability to work or focus on the activity that he's working on. Similarly, mind would also have its potency compromised if the alertness is compromised. So that's the first fault of a compromised alertness. Then the next fault is that you do not generate pure wisdom. So verse number 26. Even those who have much learning, verse number 25. Whatever has been learnt, contemplated, and meditated upon by those whose minds lack alertness just like water in a leaking vase will not be retained in the memory. So, uh, if you've studied the Lamrim text in one of the chapters that deals with uh, the training on the lower scope, it talks about the three faults that describe typical kind of practitioner like us. Uh, so we are like an inverted pot. We are like a leaking pot with a hole in it, and we are like a pot which already has some sort of contaminants in it. So if the pot is filled with the nectar of wisdom, firstly, if it is inverted, you're not able to receive it. Uh, because we have all kinds of obstacles, we're not able to receive those teachings. Then even if the pot is placed properly, because it's got a hole in it, no matter how much you uh, how much you fill the pot with wisdom, you'll not be able to retain any of that because it's leaking. And if it's already contaminated with wrong views, we have all kinds of wrong views, then no matter uh, the the amount of instructions that we get from other people, will not be able to effectively deploy them. So we have those kind of faults. So in a similar manner, if the mind uh, does not have this guarding alertness, then it's like a leaky pot. And no matter how much you invest in studying the Dharma through hearing, through reflection or contemplation, or through meditation, none of that would be retained. Yeah, it will be because of the leaky nature of our mind. No, we'll not be able to retain any of that. So as you know, there are three doors through which we can acquire wisdom. There's Shrutamai Prajna, which is wisdom that you acquire through through hearing. There's Chintamai Prajna through contemplation or reflection. And there's the Bhavanamai Prajna, which is through meditation, the Prajna that you acquire through meditation. So if your mind lacks alertness, then uh, you know any wisdom that you're supposed to acquire through these three means, that will not be retained. So that's the second fault. One does not generate pure wisdom, the wisdom that you can generate through the three means of hearing, reflection, and meditation. So then, verse number 26, it talks about the fault that one is not able to generate pure morality. So even those who have much learning, faith, and willing perseverance will become defiled by moral fall due to the mistake of lacking alertness. So this is verse number 26, right? So anybody who does not have this guarding alertness, especially for ordained people like us, we have this set of vows that we're supposed to keep. If we're not alert, uh, it will inevitably result in some sort of transgression of some vow. We got a lot of vows that we have to keep, and that then compromises your practice, because your practice of ethical discipline is the foundation on which you build your practice of some shamatha and then vipassana, uh, meditative stabilization of wisdom. So if you're not alert, you're a little casual, it can lead to very serious kind of transgressions. And uh, because you transgress your vows, then your foundation of shila becomes compromised, and then your practice of shamatha and vipassana gets compromised. So you need to be on your guard all the time to ensure that even the most minor of transgressions does not happen. So that your shila, your morality is pure. So a person, he might have immense faith in the three jewels, and he's received a lot of teachings, and generally he's practicing virtue. But then if he compromises his alertness, even for a moment, even just for a moment, that can lead to very serious consequences. It could lead to serious downfall, serious transgressions. So one needs to be very mindful of that. and one needs to strive in guarding the alertness of the mind. So that's the third fault. Then the fourth fault is any virtue that you've accumulated earlier from the past, now that can be destroyed. So this verse reads, the thieves of unalertness, in following upon the decline of mindfulness, will steal even the merits I have firmly gathered, so that I shall then proceed to lower realms. So, um, if you're not careful, uh, you're not guarding your mind with the right amount of alertness, and you let one of your afflictions manifest. It might seem very innocuous to us, but you don't. For example, you do not guard your mind, and you let some situation irritate you, and that irritation kind of manifests as anger towards somebody. You're not sure about the spiritual status of that other person. It may happen that the other person is highly realized. It could also be a bodhisattva that you've generated anger towards. And if that happens, then you're erasing uh, eons worth of merit that you accumulate. So a single moment of impatience or anger towards a bodhisattva can erase, wipe out eons worth of your merit, and it sets you back on your spiritual development. So you need to be very aware of that. So the if you let your alertness compromise your alertness, then it can lead to these kind of situations. So a person without alertness, guarding alertness, will be robbed by the thief of afflictions. So the affliction, the example that we just spoke of, is the affliction of anger. So that anger can then wipe out any earlier accumulated wealth of merit that you have because of the compromised alertness. So we need to ensure that we do not forget the virtuous object. Uh, that is our focus. Uh, so when earlier accumulated wealth is stolen by the person becomes deprived of his wealth, he becomes a beggar. In a similar manner, or if your alertness is compromised, then the thief of affliction will ensure that you're deprived of all the accumulation of merit from the past. So that is the fourth fault of not guarding your alertness. Then the fifth fault is that it obstructs the achievement of virtue not accumulated earlier. So the fourth fault was anything that you accumulated from the past that gets wiped out. The fifth fault is that any possibility of you having some opportunity to accumulate virtue, that gets compromised if you're not careful. So this verse number 28. This host of thieves, who are my own disturbing conceptions, will search for a good opportunity. Having found it, they will steal my virtue and destroy the attainment of life in a happy realm. So you're working hard to ensure that you attain rebirth in one of the happy realms. For that, you need to accumulate virtue. And then you're presented with an opportunity to practice virtue, but then you let your guard down and your alertness is compromised. And if your alertness is compromised, then your practice of the virtues, whether it is generosity or whether it's patience, ethical discipline, or perseverance, that gets compromised, and you're not able to accumulate virtue for your future lifetimes. So you need to be again aware of that. So this gang of afflictions, these gang of robbers, uh, they just look for an opportunity to steal a wealth of virtues. And if your mind does not have guarding alertness, then this gang of afflictions will be able to accomplish their goal of depriving us of our wealth of virtues. So this is the fifth fault of lacking alertness. So this is then followed by um, guarding mindfulness as a method for guarding alertness. So you need to guard your alertness. How do you do that? the method to do that is to guard mindfulness. So as I said, mindfulness, it is a mental factor, um, and its essence is of non-forgetfulness of the virtuous object, which it is familiar with. So something that is already been introduced to the mind, has already been introduced to. And then it has the function of ensuring that there's no mental distraction or there's no mental wandering. So the essence is non-forgetfulness. So mindfulness kind of it identifies the virtuous object, and then it identifies the boundary. And then there's another mental factor, the mental factor of alertness or vigilance or introspection, which realizes it's kind of inspecting the three doors, the body, speech, and the mind, uh, and checking whether these boundaries have been transgressed. And then if you're mindful enough, then you'll realize through the force of introspection or alertness that the mind has wandered off the virtuous object. And then the mental factor of attention brings it back to the virtuous object, and mindfulness holds it back onto this virtuous object. Yeah.
So when they say what is a mindful way of living, is it more like a broader like construct in some sense, and attention, all of that come under it, or like what does it really mean? Versus being, they say it should be present and they say should be mindful. Like, what is it? I mean, I know it's a little abstract, but what is it supposed to be in some sense?
So as I said, yeah, your day-to-day actions, because you aspiring for a goal like the goal of liberation or omniscience, eh, eh, they need to be virtuous, and the virtues, how do you ensure that they're virtuous? But you ensure that by practicing the six perfections. So you're practicing generosity and all that. When you're engaging in an act of generosity, for example, you need to be aware uh, that when you are making an offering to a person who needs, when you're sharing resources with somebody else, you're giving some donation to a beggar, for example. Yeah. You need to ensure that this virtuous state of mind, the mind of giving, so the focus should be on giving. Yeah? That does not get compromised by your concern for any of the eight worldly concerns that we usually talk about. For example, it shouldn't be with the intention that you want to earn some good name or fame. The person, this person is very generous. You're doing that act uh, so that other people around you notice that act, and then they speak of you as being somebody who's very generous and all that. So you're doing it with the wrong motivation. So the motivation is a mental state, and it precedes the act of giving. Yeah. So when you are engaging in that act, mindfulness will ensure that motivation is not impure. Or even before you get into the act of giving, uh, mindfulness along with the mental factor of alertness will will put a pause on that action, because the motivation is not right. You should have analyzed that, okay, the motivation is not right now. So let me pause and let me work on generating the right motivation. And when the right motivation is generated, then the act of giving will be initiated. And even when the act of giving is being executed, uh, the mental factor of mindfulness and the mental factor of alertness will ensure that that act is not compromised again through some other affliction. Yeah. Your affliction of desire, for example. Desire in this case is for name. Desire is for fame. Yeah? So that mental factor does not manifest. So they're kind of constantly checking uh, all these mental states. Okay, so guarding mindfulness is the method through which you guard alertness. So verse number 29. What is verse number 29? Therefore, I shall never let mindfulness depart from the doorway of my mind. If it goes, I should recall the misery of the lower realms and firmly reestablish it there. So because there are a lot of faults, if one does not guard one's alertness, one's vigilance, we should ensure that mindfulness uh, it does not stray from the door of the house of the mind. Yeah. So mindfulness is guarding the doors. As I said, it ensures that the mind stays on the virtuous object. Yeah. It retains the virtuous object. Um, so if your mindfulness gets compromised, then your mind can slip out through one of the doors. Yeah. So because now you are also studied, you've seen the faults of a compromised alertness. If the mindfulness is not strong enough, and the mind kind of wanders off into into a direction which is not the same as the virtuous object that you've chosen, then it leads to all kinds of problems. So you need to ensure that mindfulness continues to be at the door of the house of the mind. So in case the mindfulness weakens, then what you do is you remind yourself of the suffering that one could experience in the lower realms. So you studied in the Lamrim the specific kind of suffering that we could experience in the lower realms, in the realm of animals, in the realm of hungry ghosts, in the realm of hell beings. So just remind yourself of the suffering that one could experience there, and automatically your mm, the inspiration that you need to retain your mindfulness, that kind of comes through. So that is verse number 29. Then verse number 30. Um, now you identify that guarding mindfulness is the approach or the method that you need to guard alertness. And how it can be done? It can be done by relying on an outer condition of a virtuous friend. So through virtuous friend, you can ensure that you can guard mindfulness. You can guard mindfulness by generating the inner condition, some sort of inner condition to correct the mental application. What exactly these are, we'll come to it. And you can guard mindfulness by generating the inner conditions for alertness and mindfulness again. So the first is relying on the outer condition of a virtuous friend. So one way to guard your mindfulness is to rely on a virtuous friend. This is an outer condition. So verse number 30 says, through staying in the company of spiritual masters, through the instructions of abbots, and through fear, mindfulness will easily be generated in fortunate people who practice with respect. So, as devoted mm, practitioners, uh, we uh, we receive teachings and instructions from our teachers, and we are constantly in the midst of seniors and teachers and gurus and abbots. The mere presence can ensure that you guard your mindfulness. You don't compromise your mindfulness, and your mind does not stray off or wander off the virtuous objects. So there's this very interesting example that comes to my mind. Has anyone heard of a teacher from Thailand called Acharya Buridat Man? He was, in fact, His Holiness actually mentions him quite often in his teachings. Some of the observations that he's made in his biography, they kind of support some of the claims from Mahayana. He was a Thai practitioner, and he is widely acclaimed as being an Arhat. So he attained the state of a core destroyer Arhat in his lifetime, and very widely revered in Thailand. Even now, if you go around Thailand, you'll find his statues everywhere. So, as I said, he attained the state of an arhat. So he was accomplished in the practice of the clairvoyances. So he had the 5 clairvoyances, and he could observe the state of others' minds. So, yeah, in his biography, these incidents are very frequently mentioned. Whenever he would give teachings to his students, his disciples, who were monks, they would be very, very careful to make sure that they stay mindful of their physical person. So even if they're going on their arms around begging for food, uh, you know, just keep your eyes down and on your begging bowl, focused on the begging bowl, and just be aware of your physical person, nothing else. Uh, and then out of nowhere, in spite of all these precautions, we find that the teacher, Acharya Man, would then go on a very lengthy lecture, speaking about things that most people in his assembly would find unrelated. And then when they come back to the monastery, the monks would discuss amongst themselves, what is it that Acharya was talking about? And the monks would be confused, all of them, because it wasn't very pertinent to what they were doing at that time. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, somebody would come forward and say, okay, Acharya was actually trying to admonish me because my mind had strayed and it was actually thinking about this thing. So Acharya had actually identified that this is what this person was thinking about. And then in order to correct his conduct, Acharya would give a lecture. So Acharya Man, he was a very accomplished practitioner, and through his biography, there's one thing that is repeated. He says that the two most important things in the armor of any spiritual practitioner are mindfulness and wisdom. So ensure that your practice of mindfulness is very strong, and through that, of course, you will have wisdom. Wisdom is necessary to cut the roots of samsara, but mindfulness is what will get you there. So yeah, guarding mindfulness is very, very necessary, and uh, you need to rely on these kind of virtuous friends to help you guard your mindfulness. So the next verse, verse number 31 and 32, first two sentences of verse number 32. Uh, I'm ever dwelling in the presence of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, who are always endowed with unobstructed vision. By thinking in this way, I shall mindfully develop a sense of shame, respect, and fear. So, this is how you generate the inner condition of correct mental application to guard your mindfulness. So, there are, as you know, our environment is pervaded with bodhisattvas and buddhas, enlightened beings, and they have clairvoyant powers. So they're always in our field of vision, and they have us in the field of vision rather uh, through the power of the five clairvoyances. Um, and you need to be aware of their presence. So if you make yourself aware of their presence, and automatically through fear, uh, through a sense of shame, you will be on your toes. You'll guard your mindfulness. So this practice also has the added advantage that while you're reflecting thus, you're also reflecting on the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. So the practice of reflecting on their qualities, that also gets enhanced. So that's how you generate the inner condition to correct your mental application, correct your mindfulness. So then the next part of verse number 32, how to generate mindfulness. This is how to generate mindfulness, how to generate the inner conditions of mindfulness and alertness. So the first part is how to generate mindfulness. Then alertness, no, 32nd verse. Also through doing this, recollection of the Buddha will repeatedly occur. So you're aware of the presence of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and you not only guard your mindfulness, but it also helps you practice reflection on the qualities of the three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha. And because of that, you can accumulate a lot of merit also. So verse number 33 is how to generate alertness from mindfulness. So as we had seen, this part deals with guarding guarding mindfulness as being the method to guard alertness. So how to generate introspection or alertness from mindfulness. Verse number 33. When mindfulness is set with the purpose of guarding the doorway of the mind, then alertness will come about, and even that which had gone will return. So when you have adequate mindfulness, then as I said, the mindfulness, what mindfulness is doing is setting a perimeter for your mind. The virtuous object is there, that defines the perimeter. And without that perimeter being identified properly, clearly by mindfulness, alertness will not be effective. Alertness, it observes whether there's any strain away from that perimeter. So if the mindfulness is strong enough, then in combination with this mindfulness, your alertness will be very potent and very strong. So at the time when one has mindfulness, one can remain alert and protect oneself from mind wandering off uh, from the virtuous object and other afflictions manifesting in your mind stream. If your mind wanders off the virtuous object, then other afflictions will manifest. So mindfulness is the key for you to ensure that alertness manifests in your mind stream. Okay, so the practice of guarding the mind with mindfulness and alertness. So the verse number 34, 35, etc. They're dealing with this practice of guarding the mind with mindfulness and alertness. So the first verse talks about how to train in the morality of restraint, and then specifically in that, how to purify the actions of the three doors, the body, speech, and the mind. And before you actually go about purifying the actions of the three doors, you need to be aware, investigate the motivation before this physical action is effected, or before this verbal action is uh, bodily action or the verbal action or the mental action is initiated. So the first part, how to investigate the motivation before a physical action is effected. So that's verse number 34. When just as I am about to act, I see that my mind is tainted with defilement. At such a time, I should remain unmovable like a piece of wood. So before engaging in any kind of physical action, like walking or talking or speaking or investigating, one needs to investigate the state of the mind and check what the motivation is. In the example that we just spoke of, the motivation was not right before engaging in the physical act of giving. So if the motivation is not right, and if your mindfulness and your alertness is proper, strong enough, then you will be able to pause that action. So that's what is being said here. So you examine the motivation first, and then if the motivation is not right, then you remain in a state of inaction. So you remain like a piece of wood. So investigating the motivation before the physical action is effected. So that's verse number 34. Verse number 35 is about how to investigate the general way of looking, how to look uh, at the mind. Yeah. So the verse number 35. Never should I look around distractedly for no purpose. With a resolute mind, I should always keep my eyes cast downwards. So this is actually very, very pertinent for ordained people, of course. So because we have all these kind of vows, any kind of compromise on this front, we need to have a very focused kind of vision, not stray your eyes in any direction randomly. Uh, if it happens that your alertness is compromised, your mindfulness is compromised, and then it can lead to any kind of any a transgression of one of the several rules that we're supposed to keep, abide by.
Question.
Yeah.
This is also with regard to influence.
Influence.
Influence. So, and verse number 35,
Mhm.
when he talks about never should I look around distractedly for no purpose, is it also about influence, me getting influenced?
Yeah. The environment has all kinds of obstacles.
Influences,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
But I try to understand the difference between in the first part when he talks about relying on good company. So even if he was talking to groups of monks, it is assumed that it is all good company, but on the path of evolution. So they've not realized themselves.
Yes.
So there is also doubt and worry and distractions and certain seeds of delusions and all of that. So when so on one hand, you are seeking guidance, not just from the teacher, the abbot of it, but also through discussions and debates through the company, the good company you
Yes.
keep. But that good company is relative. So and then you're saying that you have to be one-pointed, and in that one-pointedness, not get influenced by the others. So it's both happening simultaneously. Am I understanding this then?
Okay. What is being talked about here is the physical environment around you. So the environment can have all kinds of distracting influences. So if you do not keep your focus on the virtuous object that you have identified, and you let your vision stray in some random direction, then it can lead to some other affliction manifesting. So that for that you need to keep your vision very narrow, keep your eyes not cast. Uh, in the company of monks, and if you are engaging in some discussion, all that is for a very virtuous purpose. Yeah. In that state, it will actually, the point comes a little later in the text. You need to be aware of there's some sort of prioritization that you need to do. Yeah. So if it is a discussion on spirituality, on the topic of emptiness, for example, and you have to engage in discussions with other people, and then again the discussion also can be focused. The discussion also needs to be focused. It can't stay off on worldly issues. You can't have the discussion on worldly issues. Yeah. So some element of focus is still being implied even in those kind of situations. But some kind of compromise is allowed if the purpose for which that compromise is done serves a higher purpose, serves a higher goal rather. Yeah. So you need to do some sort of prioritization, and then some compromise is definitely allowed.
So if the practice of the example of generosity, it is about giving to somebody, then one is that I am focusing on my practice of generosity, and I am through my mind practice alertness, while looking at my motivation to give, and then checking against the 8 issues or whatever the word is there. I'm saying, okay, I've ticked all those boxes and I'm going to give for this season. And in that space, if there is any doubt and I am kind of still not really, so one is of course the fear of working in a bubble. Where in that bubble I could be influenced by my own afflictions of my past and stuff. So I would need the guidance of the Sangha, like someone to kind of say, am I giving for the right reason? Is there anything that you can see that is amiss or whatever? In that space, there is influence coming in. And who is this person who's going to help me? How evolved, or what is the intention and motivation? All of that. If I could also be, if someone asking me, or I could be asking someone. In that space, what is the balance? Where I need to figure this out on my own versus I need to ask, because it has to be balanced, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you could be in your own delusion doing your own
no,
thing.
that's not recommended. In fact, you need to rely on spiritual friends.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you need to rely on instructions that you receive.
And also observations from others
Observations.
who are training me.
Yes, yes,
Right? I mean, there would be a senior who's training me,
Yes.
who's also kind of saying, okay, here's where you're going wrong, here's
Yes.
where you're going right, whatever. Right?
Yeah. So then the purpose is that you are receiving instructions. These instructions is what you will act on subsequently. So in the subsequent phase, when you're acting on those instructions, you retire to your own space, your own cottage, and you do reflection and meditation. In that state, your mindfulness has to be very, very strong. Yeah, there you sit down, you recollect all the instructions, put them in your hard disk here, and then make sure that there's no chance of forgetting those instructions. And then when you start reflecting, there will be moments when the mind stays off. Then through the factor of mental attention, you bring it back to the instructions. But the mindfulness has to be active. Otherwise, you would have forgotten those instructions, and the mental factor of attention wouldn't know where to bring it back to. Yeah. So in those states, the mental factor of mindfulness needs to be very, very strong, very prominent.
And the other thing is, it is not just about. So there are two aspects of it, which is not just wisdom, but also the practice of wisdom. So it's not just about sitting with the reflection of should I give or not give, or how should I give, how much should I give, when should I give, who do I give, all of that too. After that, there is a requirement of actual the practice of giving, right? And so it is not just sitting here with the reflection, but actually digesting that somewhere and actually doing it.
Yeah.
And in the doing it and in the practice, there could be, because we are evolving, we are not already, when we are at like at a very, very, beginner level, there would be certain mistakes that we make, irrespective of everything. Perfect guidance, perfect environment, perfect towards to whatever capacity you are in.
Oh.
And there would be mistakes that you make. And then what happens?
Okay. You always, first of all, you ensure that you got the right instructions, the right amount of instructions, and then, and if you are not still confident that you'll be able to, practice those instructions, then there's no point in just retiring to the mountains to do your meditation practice. You ensure that you're still in some proximity of a spiritual guide, virtuous friend. And if you get stuck in your practice, you're not able to understand some instruction, you still have the option of going back to the spiritual friend and clarifying your doubts. So that is a call that you need to take before engaging in the meditation practice. So reliance on a spiritual guide is the foundation of your spiritual practice. In the long run, that is mentioned as the foundation, the root on which you can build your spiritual practice. So unless you develop that confidence that you got the necessary amount of raw material with you, then you can retire and do your practice in solitude. But till that time, I think it's better that you still be in the proximity of the teacher. There are a lot of retreatants, hermits who practice in meditation retreat huts in Dharamshala in the mountains. But every time His Holiness has a teaching, a sermon scheduled in Dharamsala, all these retreatants, the hermits they come for the teaching. They receive the teachings, instructions, and then go back and do the practicing here. So, yeah. Okay, so we were on verse number 35 we've done, right? So 36, how to look when you're tired. So, okay, we'll just do a few more verses and then pause. How to look when tired. So if you're tired, then just, exhausted, then some leeway is permitted. So verse number 36, the first two lines. But in order to relax the gaze, for a short while, I should look around. So the verse number 35 says that you should always keep your eyes cast downwards. But if you're exhausted, you're tired, then you're allowed to kind of, for a short duration, just relax your eyes by looking around a little bit. Yeah. So especially when one is looking for a resting place, when one is tired. I mean, these are instructions given to monks who are on maybe he's gone to on his arms round begging for food, and then he gets tired, and then he has to look for a place where he can retreat to and have his food. So at that time, he's allowed to kind of look around and look for a resting place where he can have his meal and then meditate. So in such kind of situations, one is allowed to look around occasionally. Then how to act when another person comes close. When you have your eyes cast downwards all the time, and you're allowed some leeway when you're tired. Then what happens if there's somebody who comes in your field of vision? Uh, so that is verse number 36 uh, and 37. So, and if someone appears in the field of vision, I should look at him and say, welcome. To check if there is any danger on the path, I should look again and again in four directions. So you retreated, or you're looking for a resting place, and then somebody happens to come into your field of vision, then you should be very polite and have a smile on your face and wish him, say hello to him or welcome him. And also, when you're looking for a place to retreat to, you need to be aware of any kind of possible dangers on the road. So you're allowed to then look around a little bit in the four directions. So that's verse number 37, the first part of verse number 37. Then verse number 37 and 38. These give instructions on how to act when one rests. So to rest, I should turn my head around and then look behind me. Having examined both ahead and behind, I should proceed to either come or go. So if you identified the place for resting, then before you sit down, then you're allowed to kind of check what's there behind you. See, these are all instructions, as I said, to monks who could be retreating to some tree in the forest, and you need to be aware of what's there behind also before you can sit down and meditate. So just make sure that there are no dangers in your vicinity before you sit down for your meal and then do your meditation. So that's verse number 37 and 38 part, first part. And then relating it to other actions, verse number 38, the second part, being aware of the necessity for such mindful alertness, I should behave like this in all situations. Okay. Then verse number 39 is investigating the action of remaining. So we'll just look at the verse and then look at the explanation. Once having prepared for an action with thought, my body will remain in such a way. Then periodically I should look to see how the body is being maintained. So you retire to your resting place, and you decided that you're going to sit in this kind of posture, uh, physical posture, while you're having your meal or while you're meditating. Then periodically you should, check whether the posture is still being maintained. Whatever you have planned, that posture is still being maintained. So that is investigating the action of remaining. And then you have the following verses then talk about how to investigate the mind, uh, fastening the mind, tethering the mind to a virtuous object. That is verse number 40. And then analyzing whether it is single pointedly focused on virtue or not. That is verse number 41. And then explaining the permitted and forbidden actions. That is verse number 42, 43, and 44. So we'll just look at these verses and then pause. So the first verse number 40, it talks about the need to fasten the mind to a virtuous object. So with the utmost effort, I should check to see that the crazed elephant of my mind is not wandering off, but is bound to the great pillar of thinking about Dharma. So the crazed elephant mind it has the natural tendency to wander off. So you need to ensure that it is tethered to some sort of virtuous dharmic subject, and it is reflecting on that, and ensure that it does not stray off, it does not wander off into some sort of an unnecessary direction. So check with all your effort that the unsubdued, the crazy elephant mind, it does not lose the great pillar of this dharmic virtuous object that one has accepted to contemplate on single pointedly, and then make sure that it remains fastened uh, to this dharmic pillar. So that's verse number 40. Then verse number 41, analyze whether the mind is single pointedly focused on virtue or not. So those who strive by all means for concentration should not wander off even a moment by thinking, how is my mind behaving? They should closely analyze their mind. So you've chosen your virtuous mind. Mindfulness has identified, or you've identified the virtuous mind. The mindfulness mental factor has identified the perimeter, and then the alertness, guarding alertness. The alertness mental factor ensures that the mind does not stray beyond this perimeter, and that gives you the best chance to then cultivate this mind of single-pointed concentration. So I shall not even for one moment lose my concentration on this virtuous object. You need to have that kind of resolve and not be distracted by something else. So you need to analyze your mind repeatedly, saying that this is the state of the mind. This is what the mind is now engaged with. And if it is not the virtuous object that you've chosen, then you bring it back to the virtuous mind and let mindfulness then hold it onto that virtuous mind. So that is how to analyze whether it is single pointedly focused on virtue or not. And then verse number 42, 43, and 44 talk about specific situations where you're allowed to, dilute your mindfulness a little bit. So, verse number 42. But if I am unable to do this, when afraid or involved in celebrations, then I should relax. Likewise, it has been taught that at times of giving, one may be indifferent to certain aspects of moral discipline. I should undertake whatever deed I have intended to do and think of doing nothing other than it. With one mind applied to that task, I should set about for the time being to accomplish it. By acting in this way, all will be done well, but by acting otherwise, neither action will be done. Likewise, there will be no increase in the proximate disturbing conceptions that come from lack of alertness. So, the doubt that probably you were referring to, if there's a context in which you perceive some danger, or you're engaged in some virtuous activity of making prostrations to the three jewels, uh, in these kind of situations, the mindfulness can be the mindfulness from the virtuous object that you previously identified, that can be diluted a little bit. Yeah. Also, it says that, it gives an example. Like, for example, when you're in a context where you have to practice some sort of a generosity, act of generosity, then you can compromise your practice of morality to some extent. So the example that is given is that there are different kinds of generosity. The generosity of material resources, the generosity of giving dharmic teachings, and there's also the generosity of ensuring or giving security to animals or sentient beings who are in fear. So if you are in a situation where there's a hunter chasing some animal, and you have witnessed both. You know the hunter is here. You know where the hunted animal has strayed off, in which direction it strayed off in, and the hunter comes and asks you which direction the deer has gone in, and you then analyze the situation there, and you deliberately tell the hunter that it's gone in the east when the deer has actually gone in the westerly direction. Now here you're actually engaging in some sort of a lie. But why is that? Because you are engaging in the practice of generosity, of giving security to an animal in fear. So the context demands that you engage in that action, in the act of generosity, and your practice, the training of ethical discipline can be diluted at that moment, and can be compromised at that moment. So in a similar manner, mindfulness on a virtuous object in certain contexts, that can be loosened a little bit when you're engaging in other virtuous activities. So you need to prioritize which is more virtuous, which has a greater purpose, and then engage in these actions. So we'll pause here for the moment, yeah, and we've already overshot our time. So we'll just end the session with a short meditation, 5 minutes maybe. So since we've been discussing mindfulness and how mindfulness is effective when it's combined with the practice of alertness. So we'll just do a very short meditation. So just relax in your seats and keep your eyes closed. And I'll instruct you on what object to focus your mind on, and then you can engage your mind on that object. So just visualize about 2 meters ahead of you a golden throne supported at each of the four corners by a pair of lions. And then on this golden throne, there's a fully blossomed lotus. And on this lotus seat, there's the sun and the moon seat. And seated on the sun and the moon seat is Shakyamuni Buddha, a resplendent, uh, bright and radiant with a golden color complexion, and uh, is sitting in the mudra where is in the full lotus mudra. His right palm is rested on his right thigh, right knee, and the middle finger is touching the moon seat. And the left palm is in the meditation posture, holding the Hikshapatra, which is filled with nectar. And then his face is resplendent. It's got a smile. His lips are red. Eyes are fine and narrow and long. And he's got a ushnish on the crown of his head. And he's got dark black blue hair, each hair curling to the right. So just visualize this and focus your mind on this image. So also observe that your mind is focused on this image itself and it's not straying in some other direction. So just observe the state of your mind and check if it's thinking about this image or something else. If it is strayed off, then affect your mental factor of attention and bring it back to the object of meditation, and let your mindfulness then take over and keep your mind focused on this meditation object, uh, aware of its attributes, aware of its form, and ensure that it retains its focus on this meditation object. Now bring the focus of your mind just to the face of Shakyamuni Buddha. Now bring the mind focus to the Ushnisha on his crown. Now zoom out again and bring to your mind the entire image of Shakyamuni. Okay, we'll conclude with a short dedication. So today we studied the necessity to guard our mind to ensure that our training of the six perfections is not compromised. And in order to guard our mind, we need to develop a practice of guarding mindfulness and guarding alertness. So mindfulness again is the method that you need to develop to ensure that alertness is guarded. We've seen the faults of not guarding our alertness also. So mindfulness is the key. So just recollect all the instructions that we received through our discussion from all these verses in the text. Mindfulness is critical to our practice. In fact, as an ordained being, you know, a great practitioner from the past once noted that when he was asked which of the vows that he has taken, he considers to be the most important, which vows he focuses on, and he says that the only vow that I really care about is the vow of mindfulness. So if I am mindful, then I ensure that all the vows that I've taken as a monk, those are not transgressed. So that is the importance of mindfulness in our practice. So the resolve that we'll cultivate this practice of mindfulness so that our other practices then develop further. So with that kind of resolution, let's just make a short dedication. So through this discussion, we accumulated a lot of merit. So due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a completely enlightened Guru Buddha and lead all sentient beings without exception into that enlightened state, into that state of Samyak Sambodhi. And may the supreme jewel Bodhicitta that has not arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. Okay, just recite this prayer for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So this send off a prayer for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche by His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. Fearless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratik Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and for living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss! Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of Bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Okay, let's stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye.
It's not just very happy. Thank you.